And then, much to my surprise, in 1969, I got an invitation to the U.S. Women's Invitational, and I was only a 1700 player. But Adam, back then, that would put you in the top 10 of women. Now you have to be a 22 or 2300 player to get invited. But back then, that was good enough. And so I played in 1969 at the McAlpin Hotel and made several friends. I bonded immediately with Gisela Gresser, Mona Karff, and Marilyn Simmons, and a few other women. There was Rachel Guinan, I knew well. But it was during that tournament that the famous breakfast incident with Bobby Fischer took place. You want to hear about that?
Yeah, let's hear about that.
Okay. So Marilyn and I were the two youngest in the 1969 women's tournament. So we were hanging out together. And Bob, and also at the same location, the U.S. Junior Invitational was going on. So there were some very strong players, young Norman Weinstein, players of that caliber. So Bobby Fischer dropped by and he looked at the women and on the women's tournament too. And he took an immediate shine to Marilyn, who was a very cute gal. She recently passed away. And so that evening after the round, he analyzed her game. Now think about this. The greatest player in the world is taking the time to analyze the game of a 1900 player and take it very seriously. Well, we were all thrilled to death. And then after that, Marilyn and Bobby Fischer and Bobby's friend Jackie Beers and I decided to walk over to the East Side Automat. It was about 2 in the morning, say, and have breakfast. And Bobby had eggs and watermelon. I remember that. I thought that was sort of a bizarre combination. But whenever I hear anything negative about Bobby Fischer, I tell people that one night he was absolutely charming, delightful, gracious, good company. And we had a wonderful time.
But do you prefer Dorothy or Dolly?
Okay, I'll explain that. That's a good first question. I'm always called Dolly. And of course, on documents, driver's licenses, whatever, it's Dorothy. Dorothy was my mother's middle name, but I had a great grandmother whose nickname was Dolly. And Dolly is a nickname for Dorothy. So I've always been called Dolly.
All right. Well, thank you for this interview. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you for asking me. First, I have to clear up one thing. You really have inflated my chess career by calling it a career. I mean, I've never, thank you. I've never been a super serious chess player. You know, my social life and my own profession have always dominated. Chess has always just been a casual a pleasure to me. I've always loved it. And because I started in an era when there weren't a lot of women chess players, and because I seemed to take to it pretty easily, um, I think I was perceived as being a better player than I am because I floated to the top of the women's group at that time. So I did actually become a master. Let me give myself that credit, but I was not a great chess player. And now I cling to my USCF floor rating. I'm so grateful for that. So now I'm a lifelong floored expert. I've been retired since 2011. I live in New York. I go to Shakespeare classes, opera classes. I'm in 2 book clubs. I have property out in the Hamptons. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hamptons in Missouri.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, I couldn't find it.
It's an area out on Long Island, about 100 miles due east of Manhattan. It's a weekend community. And my favorite activity, and I play some chess. COVID, I'm on some chess leagues. I was on the BAL League, the Bankers Athletic League, the Commercial League. But COVID sort of interrupted that. So now it's all I can do to play once a year just to keep my rating active, which I do.
Before I forget, I saw the picture you sent of Kasparov. Would you want to tell that story?
Oh, isn't that great? So I was working as a consultant down in the World Financial Center, World Trade Center, actually, at that time. And Kasparov was there. It was in the 90s, and I've forgotten why he was there. Whether he was playing Deep Blue or what. But I had an opportunity to come in and have wine and lunch. And everybody was so nice to me. They let me sit at the table with Kasparov. So I was thrilled to death. So that's how I spent one memorable lunch hour.
Did you ever get to talk to him, or did you any other interactions with him?
I didn't talk to him. The only, of course, I told you about Fischer. I did talk to Boris Spassky. In 1972, I was working for Standard Oil of Indiana in Chicago, and I took my vacation to Reykjavik, Iceland, for a week to watch this Fischer Spassky match. The world when Fischer won, and it was so interesting. Fischer was very elusive. He didn't socialize or mingle with anyone, whereas Spassky was Mr. Charm. He went to all the restaurants. He signed your menus. He went to dance. He went to a dance in a nearby fishing village and danced with all the local girls. So I did get to speak with Spassky, and this time I did not get to speak with Fischer. So I guess those are the world champions I've met personally: Fischer, Spassky, Kasparov, and Reshevsky. You got the picture of me as a teenager with Reshevsky, right?
Yes. Yeah. I was going to ask you about him later. I met Kasparov once, and it was the first time I was trying to make one of these documentaries about chess, and I was at the St. Louis Chess Club filming, and they had a press conference, and then afterwards we were standing in the upstairs room, and everybody else started to leave to go do other things, and for about 2 or 3 minutes it was just me and Kasparov, and I couldn't think of anything to say until I was driving back home, for 3 hours. And he stood there for a minute, and then he just kind of walked off. So I probably could have interviewed
Well,
Kasparov.
if you had your wits about you and come up with a few things, he would have conversed with you. He's a pretty nice guy, and
Yeah,
pretty social. He's socially charming, also. Reshevsky,
yeah.
As you know from the photo, I did meet him when I was a teenager, and then I didn't meet him again till his birthday party, and I believe it was 1992, and I've forgotten how old he was, but he was in his 80s. It might have been. So somehow or other, a friend of mine, a local master and friend from the Marshall Chess Club named Gary Foreman, took me to the party. So that was fairly exciting. And that's it. Other than that, I didn't really know him.
Did you get any impression of his
let
personality?
me tell you sorry?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say, one of the most exciting things that happened at a certain period in New York chess was Vilgoichwerg was holding all these wonderful tournaments at the McAlpin Hotel and then at the Roosevelt Hotel. And then some of the great Russian grandmasters started coming over. And the first one to come was Leonid Shamkovich. And no, people didn't know him. And then everybody knew him because he began winning the tournaments with scores of 5-0, 5-0, 5-0. And then the following year, I believe, Anatoly Lein came over, and he was just as strong in a different way. So that was very exciting when some of the great Eastern Europeans came over and colonized the chess world. So I grew up in Orlando, Florida, pre-Disney Orlando, a sweet, sleepy, pretty little southern town. Everybody in my family, my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, my father was deceased, my 5 maternal aunts, my brother, all my cousins, we all liked table games. But the family game of choice was bridge. Every Sunday afternoon, we had family bridge games. However, one evening when I was 12 or 13, my Aunt Jean, I saw my Aunt Jean teaching my elder brother, 4 years older, to play chess. So I just watched. Nobody taught me. I just watched, and I didn't say a word. And the next day, I rushed to the public library and checked out every book they had on chess. They just had 4. 2 by Fred Reinfeld, 1 by Irving Chernez. What was his last name? I can't remember. I got Reinfeld's The First Book of Chess, the Second Book of Chess. I got the Fireside Book of Chess. I got Chess for Fun and Chess for Blood. And over the next couple of weeks, from the books, I taught myself. It was easy. Descriptive notation. I played over every game in the books. I read all the stories and anecdotes, and then I challenged my brother and my aunt to play chess. Well, of course, a casual player who has never booked up on chess cannot beat someone who knows any theory at all. So I was immediately the family champion. And then I discovered the Orlando Chess Club somehow. So I played there. And that was something. That's a story too. The Orlando Chess Club, when I was 13, and discovered there was one, was a bunch of old men in a back room of the YMCA. And that was before YMCAs had become chic young people's areas. They were like SROs for old men. So a 13-year-old girl at night couldn't go across town to play in a YMCA. It would be unthinkable. But my aunt made a deal with me. She said if I would go to confirmation classes, I was 13, on Thursday nights when the chess club met, she would escort me to the chess club. I thought that was a very good deal. So that's how I got confirmed Episcopal, and that's how I first played with real chess players. So that was great. So I played there a while, and then somebody told me there was a tournament down in Homestead, Florida. This was about 1955 or 56. I was 14 or 15. And my mother took me to it, and I won the Florida Women's Championship. And then the next year, I won the Florida Amateur Championship in St. Petersburg with a perfect score. And I also became U.S. Girls Champion. And those were the first tournaments I'd ever played in. And I walked away from those tournaments, I think, with a 1728 rating. And then, Adam, I didn't play another game of chess for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
It just, I was in high school. I ran around in a popular crowd. Everybody played bridge. I was going off to college in Texas. I wanted to have a career. I wrote for newspapers for 4 years. Then IBM recruited me and I became a computer programmer. And there was just this, that, and other thing. I didn't play another game of chess until I worked for IBM in 1967. I was 26 years old, and all the engineers played chess at lunch. And I said, "Oh, I used to be a pretty good player." And soon I was beating all the engineers except for a gentleman named Joe Hornick, who was an 1800 player. That was a bit stronger than I was. And he told me, I was in Poughkeepsie, New York. This was like 67. He told me on Friday nights in Woodstock, New York, which was a very nice little town, at an Italian restaurant, they had a chess club, and the two now famous Meyer brothers, Eugene Meyer and John Meyer, who became great masters. Eugene became a 2,500 player, and John also was a master. They were the stars there. So I started going on Friday nights to that, and then lo and behold, Bill Goichberg was holding a tournament in Woodstock. So this was 1968. I hadn't played in a tournament since 57. They found my old rating. I think it was 1728. Bill used that. And I did creditably well. I came out of the tournament still 1700 something. And so that's how I got back into chess, through the engineers at IBM and through the Meyer brothers up in Woodstock. Both of those groups, I think. And then I started being a groupie to Bill Goichberg's tournaments. He would have them at the McAlpin Hotel in New York. And anytime I could, I would come down to the city and play. I had never studied journalism or worked on a newspaper, but I had always enjoyed writing. And so after school, I thought I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. So I don't know how I was so brazen. I set up an interview with the executive director of the Jacksonville, Florida Journal. It's long defunct. And his name was John Walton. And I told him I'd always wanted to write, and I gave him whatever credentials I could rustle up. And he gave me a shot. They used to put young women in newspapering back in the women's department. That was fine. We did good feature stories and so forth. I just can't believe with no credentials and no training, I just talked my way into a job. So I worked there a year. Then I worked in St. Petersburg for the St. Petersburg Evening Independent for a year. That's also defunct. But at this time, I was not playing any chess. And then I worked for Chicago's American, also defunct, in Chicago for a couple of years. And so altogether, I had 4 years in newspapering, and I still keep up with several of my old newspaper friends, those who are alive, because I'm 82. And at that time, I was one of the youngest. I was in my early 20s. So nearly everybody I knew is now either passed along or in their late 80s or 90s. But I found my true career that way because IBM was recruiting professional writers with math aptitude to be technical writers. This was in the late 60s. There were no computer science courses in any school. So companies were just training their own. IBM was hiring and training people. You had to take practically a whole day of aptitude tests. And I did it largely because IBM's salary was so much better than a newspaper salary, as you might imagine. And I went through the 6-month training to be a tech writer, which was exactly the same training and in the same classes as those who were going to be systems programmers. And at the end of it, I said, I do not want to be a tech writer. I just love programming. So that's how I got into programming. And that's what I did. So that was from 1967 to 2011 when I retired. So that would be 44 years in programming. I don't know anything, not anything about the new technology, what we're doing right now. I was an old-fashioned IBM mainframe programmer. I designed systems, I coded them. I loved it. But as I said, I retired. I was an employee most of that time. IBM, Standard Oil of Indiana in Chicago, Manufacturers Hanover in New York. And then I went out on my own as an independent consultant, again, for the money. And that's what I did most of my career. And it was great. And I did it at the right time. The field was burgeoning and globalization hadn't occurred. So I was not competing with all the East Asian programmers. It was just homegrown Americans. So both in my chess career and in my programming career, I've been rather protected from the harshest of global competition. I kind of slid in under the radar, so to speak. How high I could have gotten it just doing it casually the way I did it. I did get it over 2,200 in the 80s at one point, and that's when I also got the women's international title. And I've played in a few tournaments where I've had pretty good results. But I don't know how high I could have gone if I had been a really serious student.
Yeah.
I might have maxed out being a casual player. Who knows? So I've had for someone who really didn't deserve it, I've had some nice opportunities. I always in the 70s and even early 80s was invited to play in the Women's Invitational. And I played in a few of them. I played in the 69 one in New York. I told you about that. I played again in 76 in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I saw Marilyn Simmons again. And of course, Gisela, Gresser, and Mona Karff were there. I played in 80 or 81 in Utah, Brigham City, north of Salt Lake City. And that's where I met Alexi. She was just a girl. And she was cute and bright as she could be. She was far and away the youngest in the tournament. And I'm trying to think whether I played. Oh, yes, I played in one in the late 80s, maybe 88 in Estes Park, Colorado. And by the way, it was in the hotel where the movie The Shining was filmed. That was fairly exciting. So that's all. I think those are the only ones I played in. And then after that, we had gotten so many truly strong Eastern European players that I was not invited again. But I did get to play in a couple of Olympiads. I played in 78 in Buenos Aires. I was board 4, and I did fine. I think I got the bronze medal for for board 4 in the tournament. And I think I sent that to the St. Louis Museum because they were collecting information on that Olympiad. And then um, I played in a senior Olympiad in Bad Wildebad, Germany. And I played in an Olympiad in Thessaloniki, Greece. So I've had some very nice opportunities. I was just strong enough, I guess, to occasionally get invited to some of these wonderful things. When I moved to New York in 1972, and I've been here ever since, my home base became the Marshall Chess Club. And I would hang out there whether I played or not, because in a way, I'm as much of an armchair chess player as an active combatant. I love watching chess. Other people, when I tell people that, they think it's like watching the paint dry, but I love watching chess. But I also played a lot there too. And, I've made a lot of friends in the world of chess. I've been to many chess weddings and things like that. Now, you asked me about Diane Savereide.
Mm-hmm.
We used to play in some when I played in a couple of women's tournaments. She was in them, and she was always the strongest player. But in fact, she and I had 3 games against one another, and I think we drew them all. And I've seen her in recent years. Whenever she comes to New York, a couple of times, recently too, she calls me and we meet for a meal. But she's not at all active in chess anymore. She said the reason is she was always so serious and intense about it that she would be unable to just be a casual player the way I am. But she was a very good player. I knew Rachel Crotto very well. Gisela and Mona I knew quite well. My experience in chess has been just the opposite. There's no glass ceiling in chess, in my opinion. My view is that if any young woman shows any interest in chess or any aptitude for chess organizers and directors will send a limo for her. They're thrilled to death. They do everything possible to encourage women to play, including having separate women's tournaments, including having mixed doubles all of that. So I don't know what the answer to the question, why are there not more women in chess, is, but I don't think it's because there's a hostile environment. I think there's a very warm, welcoming environment. Yeah. And Adam, when they first started the mixed double prizes here in New York, a passably good woman chess player or girl chess player would be like the homecoming queen at the senior prom. You walk into the tournament and 20 men are asking you to be their mixed doubles partner. So I think I don't think it was ever unwelcoming. Chess club, starting with the Orlando Chess Club when I was like 13, has been extremely welcoming. I mean, thrilled, actually. They love it. They love it when a girl or woman shows interest in chess. That's my experience. Everybody has heard, nearly everybody, Woody Allen's favorite line, half of success is just showing up. Well, the other half of success is like me, just sticking with it. I mean, if you're still playing tournament chess and league chess in your 80s, people start calling you for interviews, right? I've got another interview tomorrow evening.
Oh, wow. So you stay busy with the interviews?
Yeah, and what that one is about is my memories of the early days in the late 60s and early 70s when Bill Goichberg was starting his Continental Chess Association tournaments. I just happened in at the right time, so I have some memories of that. Jacqueline Piatigorsky, who is from the Rothschild family, married Gregor Piatigorsky, the great concert cellist. But Jacqueline was a 1900 player, which at the time was very good. But, she was a zillionaire. I mean, it would be hard to get someone that rich to study 8 hours a day, right?
It'd be hard to find
But
motivation.
she was just a naturally pretty good player. Well, there was a rivalry. They were both after the same thing, the U.S. Women's Championship, but they had a very nice relationship. They were both brilliant women. They were both financially well-heeled women. They were both sophisticated world travelers. They held each other in great respect. I was a little closer to Mrs. Gresser. When she spoke of Mona Karff, she always referred to her as Miss Karff, not as Mona. They had sort of a formal relationship, but I had the impression that they liked one another and respected one another. I remember one cute thing Mrs. Gresser said to me about Mona Karff. She says, Miss Karff loves to sacrifice pieces. So that was her style and Gisela Gresser's opinion. I enjoyed them, and I'm sorry I couldn't have played in all the ones I was invited to, because from the early 70s through the late 80s, pretty much I was getting annual invitations, but it just didn't work out with work, because to play in one of those tournaments, you have to give up 2 or 3 weeks. I met people who are still my friends today, and that was great fun. Here's something you might not know about: there's an annual team tournament in New Jersey. There are others throughout the country too. And in the late 70s, 4 of us women chess players who were fairly good, Rachel Crotto, me, Susan Sterngo, and Jenny D'Amico, that was her name at the time. She's Jenny Hoffman now. We formed an all women's team, and we named it the Vera Menchik Brigade. We wanted to sound fearsome. And Rachel was an expert. I was a 1900 player. Susan and Jenny, I think, were 1800 players. So that was a good team. And I think we did pretty well. So every year thereafter, there was a Vera Menchik Brigade. And even after the 4 of us moved on, Holly Peterson Wright took over and ran the Vera Menchik Brigade. So we started something. We started a little tradition in the team tournament. That was great fun.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And the thing is, it was a good team. So that made it even more fun.
Yeah. Have you been able to meet Irina Krush, or do you have any thoughts on her role in American chess?
I know her from the Marshall Chess Club. In fact, I took a few lessons with her a few years ago. I like her very much. And she's a real talent. I mean, she's a 2500 player. She's a grandmaster. She's been at this seriously since she was a little girl, and she's made the most of it. Yeah, and I like her. I haven't seen her in a couple of years. COVID really just messed things up, but I should start going back to the Marshall soon. I see Frank Brady once a month. I'm in a sort of semi-defunct 50-year-old nickel-dime poker game that's all old, tired, worn-out chess players. We've never raised the stakes. People are as tight as ticks. They'll fold on a nickel raise. We don't play poker anymore, but we get together once a month for dinner. And Frank Brady and his wife, Maxine, who were not in the game, have started joining the monthly dinner. Well, I hope you'll call me when you come to New York, and we'll have a bite to eat somewhere in the vicinity of the Marshall. There's some cute little restaurants. Maybe I can round up some old derelict chess players for you to.
That'd be great. Yeah.
To take dubs for. Here's one for you. Once a year, on the anniversary of Bill Lombardy's birthday, there's several of us that meet in the East Village at his favorite Polish restaurant. You know, there's a lot of sentimentality in the chess world. Bill didn't have a good end. He was a brilliant player. If Bobby Fischer had not existed, he would have been probably the best U.S. player during that era. But his end game, so to speak, his life end game was fairly rough. But a bunch of us get together and remember him on his birthday once a year. He's been dead several years. All right, he was Fischer's second in Reykjavik. Think about that for a moment. But his greatest achievement, in my opinion, is in 1956, I think it was. He represented the United States in the World Junior Championship, and he's playing against the entire Eastern Bloc Russian establishment, training children with grandmaster tutors, blah, blah, blah. Bill won that tournament with a perfect score. It was like 11-0 or 13-0. That had never happened before, and it will never happen again. What I used to do is I would go to the Marshall 2 or 3 times a week, maybe once a week to play, and the rest of the time to kibitz. And usually I could spot the up-and-comers. I could spot the young teenagers who I thought might become grandmasters. And I've been fairly accurate in my predictions. Mostly young boys. And it's interesting. It's been interesting to watch them improve and so rapidly.
Yeah. Was Josh Waitzkin? I love that movie when I was a kid. Searching for Bobby Fischer.
Searching for Bobby Fischer.
Did he play at the Marshall?
He did at one time. I've met his father, Fred, and I met Josh when Fred's mother died a number of years ago. I went to a reception, a shiva for her at the old Chelsea Hotel. She had been a brilliant artist, a feminist artist. And Josh was there. I hadn't seen him since he was a little boy, a young man, but he was there. That was a number of years ago. But I'm not even sure he's active in chess now.
I don't know. The last I read, he was an expert martial artist now. So
I think he's a smart, talented guy. I'm sure he has another profession too.
Yeah.
Adam, the first time I saw a knight fork, my heart went pitter patter. I mean, I just think it's a wonderful game. And there are more talented young women in chess. I'm happy to see that. This is interesting. I play in the commercial chess league. It's almost 100 years old. And there is an African-American woman I think she's a low expert. Her first name is Adia. I can't think of Adia's last name. And I think she has rounded up every master level woman chess player in the area. So she keeps coming up with these women's teams in the commercial chess league. that are doing very well. So that's kind of fun. And the guys like it. It adds a new element to the fustial world of chess.
What did you think of the Queen's Gambit? Did you read the book or watch the miniseries?
I haven't seen the movie. I'm the only person, chess player or non-chess player, I know who hasn't. I read the book years ago when it first came out, and I thought it was a good book.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was interesting. They were, I think, Kasparov or Pandolfini were talking about the positions in the book. To the author, they were complicated, but they wouldn't have worked at that level, so they had to come up with something that fit the book, but was still complicated enough for world-class chess, so it was.
I do have one theory. I'm almost reluctant to articulate it, but I will. To be a great chess player, grandmaster level, you have to, at least at some point in your life and for quite a while, be obsessive about it to the exclusion of just about everything else. And it's my observation, rightly or wrongly, that young men are more likely to be obsessive about things, whether it's baseball, statistics, or whatever. So that it was a young woman in the Queen's Gambit who was an obsessive person. I'm not sure I ever have known a woman who was obsessive in that way. I mean, Irina Krush is a great player and became a grandmaster, but I'm not sure she was obsessive in that way.
Okay, yeah.
But that's a subject for discussion. I'm not even sure I'm right on that. I could be wrong.
Did you ever meet Lisa Lane, and do you know about how she got on the cover of Sports Illustrated? Lisa Lane?
I never got to meet Lisa Lane. I'm in New York. She was Californian, but she had a great impact on the world of chess. There was something, she had a chess club, and there was something I sensed that must have been very exciting about her, but I never got to know her.
Can you tell me about earning your FIDE title and kind of what that experience was like?
Well, I was surprised too. I think that occurred in the women's tournament, invitational women's tournament, where I met Alexei, and this would have been either 1980 or 1981 in Brigham City, Utah. And I think it was a zonal tournament for the Women's World Championship, too. And I think I did well in it. I've forgotten, I didn't win it, but maybe I was number 2 or 3. And the performance was such that I got a title. I think I got that title, Women's International, before I got my national master title from the USCF. I got that in 1986. I must have strung together 2 or 3 pretty good tournaments, and I just got over the line, over the 2200. I still have the certificate. I was very proud of that. But between you and me and the gatepost, I didn't hold that master's rating for very long. But I did make it. I have bragging rights on that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I do kind of wish the World Championship was more like Kasparov Karpov days, where they had to keep playing regular games. So I wondered if Caruana could win it if they had played regular games the whole time.
Oh, by the way, I watched Fabiano grow up at the Marshall. I watched him in fact, there was one year he was board 4 on the chess team I was on in the annual team tournament. Just the cutest, nicest little boy. And I knew his father, Lou Caruana. And his father and I were in the same line of work. We were both IBM consultants at that point, IBM computer consultants. And by the way, his father was in his field was just as talented. I have a friend who worked for the old chemical bank, and she was working on a project, and she hired Lou Cariano as a consultant. And she later told me he was the best consultant she had ever had. And I said, well, that whole family turns in a very high level of performance, whatever they do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had forgotten that wasn't Pandolfini his teacher for a while, or
Could be. And by the way, when I first got to New York, I was a 1700 player, and I just kept being a 1700 player. And I would get what I knew should have been drawable endgame positions against stronger players, and they were managing to beat me. So I took about a dozen endgame lessons from Bruce, and immediately my rating went up to A and then expert. And ever since then, the end game has been the favorite part of my game. But he's a wonderful teacher.
did you get to meet Paul Benko?
Oh, yes, I knew Paul Benko, and I knew his partner, Ruth Cardoso, who was from Brazil and was a solid expert. Maybe she even was low master strength. She was certainly women's champion of Brazil, I'm sure of that. And she played a lot in U.S. tournaments. But so I knew Benko, and of course he was the end game expert at the time. So every now and then, if you had a chance to walk by a table where he was analyzing something, you might pick up a great end game tidbit.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of the younger players just know the name from the Benko Gambit, but they don't realize it was a real guy.
Oh, very much a real guy, and very much in the New York chess community at one time. I've mentioned Bill Goldberg's tournaments. Benko used to play in them. I mean, you might be you might be playing in one of those tournaments and just be a few tables away from him. So, yeah. And a nice guy, very accessible.